Okay, well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Monday noontime webinar. This week and this month, we're going to be talking about working with your DNA matches. Now, this is going to be a lot of information. I don't expect everybody to get everything as we're going through, but if you've got any questions, then please type them in and I'll try to address them at the end. There's a lot to working with your DNA matches. This is going to be the basics, and hopefully everybody will get some ideas from this to be able to actually use your DNA matches to help you with your family history. All right, so these are the topics that we're going to be covering today. Simply getting to know your matches, which is something that we should all do. Use the tools that are provided by your testing company. We're going to be going over Ancestry tools, mostly in specific, but any of the concepts that we talk about are going to be applicable to any of the companies that you could have tested at. But each company has a little bit different tools. But we're going to be talking about Ancestry mostly because that's where most people have tested. Explored shared matches. This is going to be something that, again, is available no matter what testing company you have gone with. Target testing a little bit, and then how to use outside resources. And when I say outside, I'm talking about outside of the testing companies. So some resources that are available in general. All right, so getting to know our DNA matches. We all know that when we have a DNA sample, we get a couple of different things with our test. We get ethnicity estimates, but we also get DNA matches. Now, DNA matches are going to be the things that are going to help us the most with our family history. Ethnicity is kind of a fun thing. It's something that gets people to test, but it's not really going to help you very much when it comes to working on your family history. So that's why it's important to get to know your matches. And of course, to do that, we need to have a basic understanding of what matching is all about. So all of the testing companies, whether you've tested at Ancestry or 23andMe or Family Tree DNA or MyHeritage, all of them provide tools that you can use to help you identify who your matches are. Because to a lot of us, when we open up that list of matches, it just looks like a big list of names. We don't know any of these people. There can be thousands of unidentifiable names there. So it's quite a daunting task. All of the testing companies are going to arrange your matches in order from highest or closest match to lowest or furthest away match. Your highest match is going to be the person who has tested with the same company as you have, who shares the most DNA with you. Now, there's a good chance that this person could be somebody that you already know. It could be a parent, a child, a cousin, a sibling. That's a possibility. So you're likely to see people that you know at the very top of your DNA match list. And all of the testing companies are going to default their match list to this setting. You can change the setting. You can change it to go the other way from lowest to highest. You can change it to reflect the newest matches. There's a lot of different ways you can mix it up, but this is going to be the default way that every company is going to present you with your matches from highest, to lowest. So this is a little sampling of what my top DNA matches look like. My mother is my highest match, and then comes my son, and then my sister, and then my nephew. So all of these people are pretty close relatives. They share the most DNA with me. So that's how you're going to see your match list when you first open it up. So even if you don't recognize the name of that highest person on the list, that person is going to be the person that shares the most DNA with you, who has tested with the same company. So DNA matches are measured in something called centimorgans. They're little units of DNA measurement, not to be confused with centimeters. They are abbreviated small c, large m, to kind of keep it away from centimeters and confusion. This is so you know that we're talking about a DNA measurement when we see small c and little n and big M. The amount of centimorgans you share with another person determines your relationship possibilities to that person. So if I share 1,000 centimorgans with a person, then I know I'm going to be more closely related to that person than a person I share 10 centimorgans with, because it just makes sense. The more the centimorgans, the closer the relationship. So that's something to keep in mind as you're looking at your match list. Larger the amount of centimorgans you share with the person, the closer your relationship to them. So the other thing that we think about too in terms of amounts of centimorgans that we share with a person is that the closer our relationship, the fewer the possibilities. So if I share, say, 1,000, 2,000 centimorgans of DNA with someone, there's only a few possible relationships that could be. They're going to be a fairly close relationship. Whereas if I share about 10 centimorgans or even 20 centimorgans of DNA with someone, that's going to be a lot of different relationships, possibilities. It could be a third cousin. It could be a sixth cousin. It could be a half fifth cousin. There are many, many, many variations and many types of relationships that could be shared with lower amounts of DNA. So in general, the closer and the more centimorgans of DNA you share with someone, the less of possibilities of relationships there are. All of the testing companies, when you have your test done and they show you matches that match with you, all of them are going to predict relationships. And we're going to say predict because their predictions are based on the number of shared centimorgans only. So when they compare your DNA test to another person in their database, they're seeing, oh, I see Lisa shares 1,789 centimorgans with Charles Ruthin. So that means that we're going to predict that that's a close family relationship. That means that this person is going to be fairly closely related to me based on the amount of centimorgans that they share with me only. Ancestry, in this case, does not have a crystal ball. They don't have any kind of magic formula. All they're doing is looking at the amount of shared DNA. They have no way of knowing, other than the amount of DNA shared, what our possible relationship could be. That's up to you to work out. So one thing they do with these predictions that sometimes freaks people out is that they predict things that we know not to be true. So if we look back here at this is predicting that Charles Ruthin is close family to first cousin. So he's in that range somewhere. So what happens if I know Charles Ruthin is my nephew? So I look at that and I'm confused. Well, Charlie's my nephew. Why is Ancestry saying he's my first cousin? That doesn't make any sense. The testing companies use degrees of cousinship for all except the closest relationships. They're only using DNA to predict a range of possibilities. So the testing companies have no way of knowing that Charlie is my nephew. They can only base their prediction on the amount of DNA that I share with Charlie. So they're saying close family, which could be a nephew, to first cousin. That's what their prediction is. So when you see a prediction between yourself and a person on your match list, don't get freaked out or think that there's something wrong in your family tree somewhere. Just realize that it is a prediction, and it's up to you to make the exact distinction as to what that relationship is. So one tool that's an outside tool that we have to help us with this is called the Shared CM Project. This is a database that is made of actual collected data that people have reported about their DNA matches. So what people have been doing over probably the last 15 years or so, since the beginning of DNA testing, is they have been reporting the actual amount of centimorgans shared between them and people who they know they're related to. So for example, say I know that Charlie and I share 1,700 centimorgans. He's my nephew. I could report to this project that, hey, my nephew shares 1,700 centimorgans of DNA with me. So that would go into the information used to create this database. So all of the the numbers that we see on this chart are based on real data from people who have done DNA tests and have figured out how their matches fit into their family trees. So this data is very reliable. This data is based on actual real relationships. So when we use a table like this, we can be sure that this is accurate data. So just one of the things that you want to look at is these ranges. So if I put in the number of centimorgans that I share with Charlie into this chart, 1700, it gives me these relationship possibilities. So Charlie could either be my nephew, he could be my uncle, he could be a half sibling, he could be a full sibling, he could be a grandchild. Because if we look at the ranges are the numbers on the bottom. So the range for a niece and a nephew is 1349 to 2175. So every niece or nephew relationship that has been reported to the Shared CM project falls between those two numbers. So you can see that there's quite a bit of variation here. The average is the number in the middle. So though a niece or a nephew has been reported as low as 1349 and as high as 2175, the average number of centimorgans shared with a niece or nephew is 1,750. So you can see this is where this data comes from. It comes from actual relationships, and this data is pretty reliable. What we can do with this website, the interactive shared CM project, is we can enter the amount of centimorgans that we share with a particular match. We can put it in the little box, and you can see it's very small at the very top. You can put it in the box, and then this calculator calculates the possible relationships that you could have with that person. So say you have a DNA match that's 165 centimorgans, and you're thinking, who is this person? You can put that 165 into the box, and it will give you the relationship possibilities and the percentage of how many people in that relationship share that amount of centimorgans. This is one of those things where it's really worth it for you to just call it up and try it out. The more you look at it, the more you'll get used to what it has to offer, and the easier it will be for you to work with it. It's a little difficult to understand at first, but I find that trying it out and trying it with different types of relationships, different matches that you have, will give you a feel for it, and it will help you to understand how it works. So I would urge you to give it a try. Look up some of your DNA matches using this tool and see how it can help you. So one of the things that we run into while we're trying to figure out who these people are is this term removed cousin. And this is a question that comes up a lot because it's a kind of a difficult concept to understand. What exactly does removed mean? What's the difference between a first cousin and a first cousin once removed? Well, if you think about it in terms of generations, that's the simplest way to think about it. When you hear the term removed, it simply means that you and the person in question are not in the same generation from the common ancestor. So on this chart here, we have Anne and Gilbert. They're the common ancestors between myself and my match. What happens is when we draw out a chart, we can see that between Alice and Hermione, there's a generation missing because Hermione is in a different generation than Alice, making them removed cousins. So a first cousin to Hermione is going to be Tom, who is the child of Peter and Heidi. So Tom and Hermione are first cousins, as you can see with the straight line. And Hermione and Alice, who is Tom's daughter, are first cousins once removed. If Alice was to have a child, then Hermione and Alice's child would be first cousins twice removed. So the once, twice, thrice, that refers to the number of generations removed from the common ancestor, who in this case is Anne and Gilbert. But the important thing to remember is when you do see removed, that means that the two people being compared are not in the same generation from the common ancestor. quick little explanation. It's very complicated, but that's the thing to remember. So when we have our matches, all of the testing companies give us that big, huge list of matches. But fortunately, they also give us a little bit more information. And they do that in the form of shared matches. So when we look at our table and we look at our list of lots of matches, we can look at any particular match. We can pull up their match page, and we can see from that page which matches are shared between us and the match being examined. So sometimes testing companies will call them shared matches. Sometimes they will call them in common with matches. Sometimes they'll simply abbreviate them as ICW. But the important part here is that what you're doing is you're comparing yourself and another match, and you're seeing which matches you have in common. This can help you to determine what part of the family this match goes to. So what happens when I pull up a match? I can look at something called shared matches. And that simply means that anyone on this second list matches myself and the person that I'm comparing. So that means that I can maybe tell how this person I'm comparing is related to me. In this case, we're seeing the shared matches between myself and a match called Nurse Penny. The person there, you can see on this list that two of the matches I share with Nurse Penny are Janet Dean and Laura Ruthin. Janet is my mother. Laura is my sister. So therefore, I know that this person is on my mother's side. Automatically, I've got more information now about her than I had when I started because she matches my mother. If I did not have my mother tested, but I knew some first cousins, say, on my mother's side, and this person matched those first cousins, then again, I would know that this person is on my mother's side. One of the things that Ancestry does is they set a threshold for shared matches. They will only show you shared matches that share at least 20 centimorgans of DNA with you and are predicted fourth cousins or closer. The reason for that is once we get down to below 20 centimorgans, the DNA shared or the DNA that is in common with us is not as reliable when we go below 20 centimorgans. It's a possibility it could be a false match. It could just be something that's not going to be viable. So that's why Ancestry cuts these shared matches off at 20 centimorgans. Because then when we look at a shared match list, we can be pretty much assured that these people are matching us together. So that's something that we want to be aware of, is that we're not going to go down to those itty bitty tiny matches below 20 centimorgans. Other testing companies have a different threshold. You just have to check and see what that threshold is if you're using a different company. But 20 centimorgans and fourth cousins or closer is the threshold for Ancestry. So another thing just to be related, just to think about, when you look at a shared match list, you may not be sharing matches with that person the same way. So if we look at this little diagram here with the circles, we can see there's me in yellow, there's a third cousin in pink, and there's a fourth cousin in green. Well, we can see that myself and the fourth cousin are sharing in a certain area that overlaps. Myself and the third cousin are sharing in an area that overlaps. And the third cousin and the fourth cousin are sharing in an area that overlaps. So in other words, the third and the fourth cousin are related through a different line than what we're related to. So as an example, Jennifer and I are related to each other through our Dutch great-great-grandparents. We have a fourth cousin match with her. I have a fourth cousin match with her who is related to me through a fourth great-grandparent who was an English immigrant. Jennifer is related to the same fourth cousin, but through her German great-great-great-grandfather on her mother's side of the family. So we are all related to each other, but not in the same way. And of course, we're dealing with very distant relationships here. So sometimes it's very possible that you might be related to someone one way, and someone else on your match list might be related to you in a different way. And then they are related to each other in a different way. So it's very, very confusing, but just keep that in mind as you're looking at your shared match list, especially when we're talking about more distant relationships. Closer relationships, you're going to tend to be related through the same line. But larger or longer and further away ones, definitely this is something to keep in mind. So all of our testing companies will offer things called filter tools. And when we filter information, basically it means we apply different things to what we want to look for. So filters, for example, a lot of them on Ancestry are in there's lots of ways to filter matches. So if we look at the top little rectangle, these are some choices of how we can filter information in Ancestry. We can look at only matches that we have not seen before. That's called unviewed. We can look at matches with whom we only have common ancestors with comparing trees, and we'll go over that in a minute. We could look at a list of matches whom we've sent messages to. We can look at a list of matches that we've written notes on. We can look at a list of matches that have family trees displayed. We can also group our matches together in different ways if we know how they're related to us. For example, we can make one group for paternal matches. We can make one group for maternal. We can make them all different ways. We can do that customized. We can filter our trees. So in other words, filtering tools simply break our huge list of matches down into something a little bit more manageable that we could look at to try to figure out better who they are. One thing that Ancestry allows us to do is Ancestry allows us to make our own groups using these colored dots. This is a really very useful thing. On the very basic level, what you could use these for is you could use them for a maternal group and a paternal group. So in other words, you could create one colored dot for a group of matches that are on your father's side and one colored dot for matches that are on your mother's side. This would be the absolute most basic way that you could make groups. From there, you could break them down even more. What I've done here is I've made groups of matches based on some of the surnames in my family tree. So some of them I know are related through my Spencer ancestor. Some of them are related through my Parker ancestor, et cetera, et cetera. You're able to use 26 different colors of dots to make 26 different groups. So if we look down here at my mother, Janet Dean, she's in 3 different groups here. She's in the Parker group, the Spencer group, and the Coffin and Jackson group. And those are all of the names on her side of the family. If we look at my son, he's got a lot of dots because he's related to both sides of the family because he's my son. So he's related to both sides. So he's got lots of dots. As you go through and you figure out your different family lines, this becomes more useful because then you can tell which persons match what side of the family. And then you can then either write to them for more information, or you can work on their family trees, or you can see the family trees that they have displayed to try to figure out where your connection is. So when we have an Ancestry subscription, we have access to quite a few tools that can be very useful to us when it comes to figuring out who our DNA matches are. I think that you would get the most use out of your DNA test if you had an Ancestry subscription. However, that being said, I know that it's extremely expensive and it's not something that everybody can do. One thing I might recommend is maybe to do it for the winter months or sometimes when you're indoors a lot and you have time on your hands. I know a lot of people will sign up for a month or two and work on it and then cancel the subscription. Whatever works for you. It can be very beneficial to you if you're going to be working with your DNA matches. So if you want to take advantage of the Ancestry tree tools that allow you to work better with your DNA matches, these are the things that you have to do. You have to have a subscription, first of all. That's fundamental. Second of all, you've got to have a public family tree. One of the things that I urge people to do if you're going to DNA test and if you hope to use your DNA results for your family history is to make a family tree and make it as detailed as you possibly can. I can tell you, I would not have been able to figure out very much regarding my DNA had I not had a very, very leafy and robust family tree. And when I say leafy, I mean back to great-great-grandparents, all of their children, all of their spouses, all of their children. So we're talking quite a few people. The more detailed your tree is and the more branches you have that are fleshed out on your family tree, the more success you're going to have with DNA testing. Because of course we know our family tree does not go straight up and down. Our family tree doesn't just go from our parents to our grandparents to our great-grandparents to our great-great-grandparents. We know all those people had siblings. We know all of those siblings got married. We know those people had children. That's where you're going to find your DNA matches, is out in those outer branches of the tree. So the more complete of the family tree you have, the easier you're going to have it when it comes to identifying DNA matches. The other thing you want to do when you get your DNA test is that you want to link your test to your tree. This is a step that often gets overlooked. It seems to be something that kind of slips through the cracks. But if you have the Ancestry subscription and you have a public family tree, you can link your test to yourself in your tree. This helps people who are looking at you as a match to determine how they might be related to you. It also helps you because then you can see also on other people's trees how they might be related to you. So if you are looking at a test of someone who's a match to you and you can see that they have their test linked to their family tree, you can more readily identify who that person might be if their test is linked to their tree. And of course, this does not always happen. So it's not always the easiest thing to do. So one question that I get an awful lot is, how do I know if the tree I have on Ancestry already is public or private? Well, the answer to that is that it's probably public. It is a default setting. So when you start a family tree on Ancestry, when you go in and you start putting all of your information in, that tree is going to be automatically by design public. Because after all, the point of Ancestry is to share trees. So they make all of their trees automatically public when you start. If you want to make your tree private, you can certainly do that. You can go into your tree settings and then into privacy settings, and that will display the status of your tree. If you want, just one more thing about this, you can make your tree private and searchable, and you will still get the tree hints in your DNA matches. If your tree is unsearchable, you will not get those. It has to be private and searchable. So that's another alternative to do that. It's a personal decision whether you have your tree private or public. There's a lot of strong feelings either way. I think it just depends on whatever works for you, honestly. You can do whatever you want to do, and it just has to be a comfortable situation for you. So how do I link my DNA test to my tree? Well, you're going to go to settings in your DNA page, and that's going to be in the upper right-hand corner. You are going to, when you get in there, you're going to see this that says family tree linking, and you're going to click on link to tree. Then you're going to choose the name of your tree from a drop-down menu. If you have more than one tree, you choose whichever tree you want to link it to. Then you are going to type your name into the field where it says enter name, and it's going to come up with that person, which is you, and you're going to highlight that and then click link DNA results. then your DNA results will be linked to your tree. And remember that your tree has to be public or private and searchable in order for any of these features to work. So when you're going through your list of matches, you're probably going to see some things that look like this. And each of the 4 examples shows different things that you're going to see when it comes to people and their DNA tests. If we see something up there that says 326 people in green, that means that this person is linked to their tree and their tree has 326 people in it, and it's a public tree. If we look where and it says unlinked tree, that means that this person has a tree, but they have not linked their DNA test to it. If we see the 459 people with the little lock in gray, that means that the person has a tree, but it's private, and their DNA has been linked to this tree in their private tree. So if you would like to get a hold of them, you're going to have to message them to find out. And then finally, on the bottom, we have the person that has no tree. And this is actually fairly common. You're probably going to see quite a few people that don't have any tree at all. And, a lot of people get DNA tests as gifts, and they're not necessarily interested in doing family trees. So this is actually probably fairly common. So a lot of times when a match has a family tree, when you look at their match detail page, you will see a snippet of their family tree. And then if you have your DNA linked to your public tree, you will be able to see what ancestor you and this match have in common. And on the left there, you can tell that this is telling me that myself and Lauren Wakeman have Carlton Parker and Jenny Spencer in common as our ancestors. Now, this is, again, an ancestry prediction based on amount of DNA shared and also based on what's in Lauren's tree and what's in my tree. So if we both have the same people in our tree, then Ancestry will say, hey, I think you might be related because you both have the same person in your tree. And I do have a question that I can answer. Antoinette asks, can I change the link to different trees, then change back? I have a paternal father's tree and a paternal mother's tree, as they both were from the same area in Ireland. Where in Ireland are your Walsh relatives? I can tell you that in a minute. The answer to that is absolutely. You can switch your DNA to any tree that you wish. You have to do it. It has to only be one tree at a time, though. You can't have your DNA linked to multiple trees. It can only be linked to one at a time. But definitely you can switch them back and forth. If you switch to a different tree, it generally takes 2 or 3 days before the hints start showing up and the in common with start showing up. So if you have multiple trees that you appear in, it's probably a good idea to periodically switch them back and forth. I definitely do it. But just remember, one tree at a time. That's how you have to do it, one tree at a time. You're welcome. And Antoinette, they are from Leash. My Walsh ancestors are from Leash. So what this is doing is that it's showing that between Lauren and I, we have a common ancestor because we have the same persons in our tree. We have Carlton and Jenny in our trees. So Ancestry is suggesting that we are related through this couple. You can look at this tree in more detail by clicking on where it says 20 people or expand tree here in the corner. So you can look at the trees if you have an Ancestry membership. So that is definitely one of the benefits of having the Ancestry membership. Okay. So, whoops. So shared ancestor hints. So you can see where it says common ancestors and there's that little leaf. We all know about the ancestry leaves. The ancestry leaves denote hints. That's what they mean. So if you have a common ancestor, you will see the little leafy thing next to where it says 123 people. If you and your match share an ancestor who appears in both of your trees, you will get a hint that shows how you may be related to the match. So again, it's just a hint. You have to evaluate it yourself. Just because Ancestry says it doesn't make it 100% true, but just as long as you use it as a hint and investigate to make sure it's the right one. Through lines, again, are something that it will happen for you. You can use them in Ancestry as long as you have your DNA linked to your public or private searchable tree. The through lines are basically a fancy way of saying you have a shared ancestor. So this is something that you can explore. You can go and look at a specific ancestor. Here I'm looking at my ancestor, Alfred Spencer, and you can see me down at the bottom. And what this is telling me is that from each of these children of Alfred, Flora, Clarence, James, Jenny, and Eber, I have DNA matches that belong to each of those children. So I could click on where it says the DNA matches, and I could check them out to see if I'm related to them, because they have those people in their trees, that may be how we're related. So it's a great way to figure out who your DNA matches are and how they might be related to you. So again, this is all hints. You just need to investigate it and figure it out. But this is definitely a very useful tool to use. Of course, we want to utilize anything that's user submitted on Ancestry with caution, because people can be just putting things in their trees and not substantiating them. They can just be having names in. Ancestry might guess, and they might say this person has the same name as this person, and they might not match you up exactly where you go. Especially, you want to be very cautious with distant relationships. Closer relationships tend to be a little bit more reliable, but definitely you want to verify everything you find by doing your own research. So what happens if you don't have an Ancestry subscription? What happens if the match you're interested in doesn't have a family tree? What happens if you write to your matches and they don't reply? Well, no problem. This is one of the things that I love about genetic genealogy. We have a great way of figuring out how our matches are related to us. So something called the Leeds method. It was developed by genetic genealogist Dana Leeds. And basically what it is, it's using your highest matches to figure out where they belong in your family tree. Now, this sounds complicated, but actually you don't need any prior knowledge at all. You don't have to know who any of your top matches are in order for this to work. What you do is you simply make a list of your matches starting at about 400 centimorgans and going down to 90 centimorgans. So you use all of those matches that match you between 400 centimorgans and 90 centimorgans. You make a list of them, just like I've done here. So I've got Karen, I've got Dale, I've got Lois, I've got Linda. All of them, you don't have to do it in Excel. You can do it on a piece of paper if that's more comfortable for you, whatever you want to do. So then after I've got my list of 16 people. So Karen matches me the highest, and she might be 400 centimorgans, and Kathleen matches me the lowest, and she might be 90 centimorgans. So I'm going to open up Karen in the match detail list, and I'm going to open up her shared matches. Anybody who I match and Karen matches are all going to be given an assigned color. And in this case, it's going to be yellow. So Karen's yellow, Dale matches Karen and I, Bill matches Karen and I, and David matches Karen and I. So they're all going to be yellow. So there's nobody else on the list that matches between Karen and I. So I'm done with Karen. So now I'm going to go to the next person who does not have a color, and that's Lois. I'm going to open Lois up. Anybody who matches Lois and myself is going to be colored red. So we've got Lois, we've got Mike, we've got Thomas, we've got Gregory, and on down the line. Anyone who matches Lois and I is red. Now we go into the next person who does not have a color, and that's Linda. I open up Linda, and again, we go to the shared matches with Linda, and those would be Yvonne and Joanne, and those are colored blue. And then finally, we go to the only remaining match that does not have a color, and that's Oscar. And Oscar is going to be colored green, and there's nobody else on the list that matches Oscar. So the idea behind this is that we've now created 4 categories. Each one of these categories is going to stand for one of our grandparents. So the yellow is going to be one of our 4 grandparents. The red is going to be one of our 4 grandparents. The blue is going to be one of our 4 grandparents, and the green is going to be one of our 4 grandparents. So this is supposed to help you identify 4 different family groups. And again, you don't need any prior knowledge as to who any of those DNA matches are. You simply do it by the numbers and by shared matching. This is the website to get further instructions and a very detailed explanation of the Leeds method, dnawithdana.com. I highly recommend it. There are many videos on YouTube about how to do this. I would highly recommend it for making use of your matches. Question: can you link more than one person's DNA to your tree, like mine and my husband's? Yes, absolutely. You can have more than one test linked to one tree, but you cannot link one test to multiple trees. So multiple tests to a tree, but not the other way around. So yes, you can have as many tests linked to your tree as you want to. Okay. So how else are we, what other tools do we have to figure out who our matches are? Well, one of the things that we can do is we can Google them. We can look for them on social media. We can look for them on People Finder websites. There's a variety of ways. One thing that people tend to do is that they tend to use the same screen name across different websites. So if you've got a match that's got one of these little screen names like RaceFan529, you can look on other websites to see if there's someone else that's using this exact same name, because people tend to use the same screen name across different websites. So you might find RaceFan529 on Pinterest, you might find them on Instagram, you might find them on Twitter. Any one of these places could give you clues as to what that person's real name is and how they might be related to you. So think of that, and also use Google. Google is a good tool for that. There are lots of different People Finder websites out there. A lot of them will give you a little bit of information and then you hit a paywall. So I tend to use a lot of them mixed together so I can get as much information about the person as possible. Obviously, it works better if you're dealing with somebody that does not have a common name, or if you're dealing with someone that has a place on their Ancestry profile. That's very helpful. But anyway, you need to use all of the clues that you have at your disposal to be able to figure out who they might be. Google is very useful for obituaries, personal websites, business websites, pictures, addresses, phone numbers. Generally, I always figure if I can find somebody in an obituary in the last 20 years or so, then I can figure out who they are. So that's a really great way to figure it out. Antoinette's asking, can you work the Leeds method with endogamy? That is a little bit of a slippery slope. I believe that Dana addresses that on her website. For those of you who don't know what endogamy simply means that a population that has intermarried, meaning that you are related to some people in more than one way. And you can imagine that tends to skew the amount of DNA that you might share with a person. So that can be definitely an issue. That happens sometimes if you have brothers marrying sisters. That will tend to skew the DNA a little bit. So endogamy really just means a prior relationship in the family. And I do believe that Dana does address that. Okay. So what if all else fails and you can't figure out who this person is and you want to find out who they are and if they can help you with your family history? Well, here are some basic tips for contacting your matches. Now, one of the biggest gripes on Facebook genetic genealogy websites is that people contact their matches and they never write them back. And so, of course, the experts have come up with lots of different tips for helping you to get a possible response when you reach out to these people. First of all, keep it brief. We all know that we don't read long messages. Identify the username and the tester name of the person you're writing about. Now, a lot of us manage multiple DNA test kits. So a lot of times if we get a message from someone, they don't tell us who they're talking about in the message, and it can be very confusing. So be sure to say, hey, I match with the test that belongs to Jane Doe. Explain in one sentence what you believe this match can help you with. So say, I think we might be related through Carlton Parker. Ask a specific question. Is Carlton Parker your ancestor? Give them an out. Ask them to please respond, even if they have no further information to share, because then you're not left hanging. And also provide your email address. A lot of people like to set up a special email address just for DNA matches. That way they don't have their regular email address associated with their test. Ancestry's messaging system is not great. You could possibly have somebody writing to you that you just don't ever see in there because their notifications are not good. So if you provide your email address, that gives the person an alternate way of contacting you and makes the chances of you getting a message a lot more increased. So if you're looking for matches in foreign countries, if you tested at MyHeritage or if you've transferred your DNA to MyHeritage, MyHeritage has a feature on there that will tell you what country your match is from. MyHeritage also originates in Israel, and it's known for having a significant number of worldwide testers. So whereas Ancestry might not be the best for people in different countries, MyHeritage tends to have a little bit more. You can download your raw DNA data from Ancestry to any other testing company other than 23andMe. And you can upload to MyHeritage for free. If you want to use MyHeritage's tools, you pay a one-time fee of $29, and then you can use their DNA tools. So if you're looking for those European matches, this is an example of my match list from MyHeritage. And you can see I've got a lot from the United States, but I also have some from different countries like Great Britain and Ireland and Australia. So it breaks them down and tells you where they originate from. All right, so that is a lot of information. Who has got some questions for me today? You can just type them in the chat or in the Q&A or whatever works for you. Okay. Kimberly, I'm on Family Search and my potential messages message me through their site. Okay, that's great. I did not know that you could do that on Family Search. That's really great. I'm glad to hear that. If you were looking for that feature, where would you find that, Kimberly? Because I'm not familiar with it, so I'd like to know which how you're accessing that. That would be great to know. Yeah, and that's why some people make a special email specifically for this. Oh, on the app. Okay, great. And that would explain it because I'm terrible with apps and I don't use them. So good. I'm glad to know that. That's wonderful. Yeah, a lot of people will create a special account for just genealogy or just DNA match email. And that is very, very, very useful to have. And I certainly hope that Family History's messaging or that Family Search's messaging system is better than Ancestry's, because Ancestry's is not great. I sometimes see messages from people days, even weeks after I get them. So it's not really very reliable. Anybody else got any questions? I would urge everyone to try the leads method. It's great fun. First of all, it's just fun making all those colors on there. I really love it. The other thing that you can do is once you have your 4 groups, then you can take those colors and you can put them on Ancestry and you can create groups using those colors. So you can make a color dot. Let's see if we go back to that screen. You can make a green colored dot, a blue colored dot, a red colored dot, a yellow colored dot, and you can call them, Fred Benjamin and Lavinia Toller red, Carl Benjamin. So that's all those people are related through Carl Benjamin. All of the people that are yellow are related through Olive Berry. And then in this case, I didn't know who June's parents were. So that's what I was trying to figure out. So all of June's maternal grandparents were blue and June's paternal grandparents were green. So it's a good way of figuring that out. I would definitely urge anyone to try it. It's a lot of fun. Okay, Kim originally signed up for the app during the Roots Tech virtual conference. Oh, that's great. Awesome. Cool. Yeah, that's a great feature. Any means of communication that we can use, the better we'll all be. So I would definitely urge everybody to give the leads method a try. It's one of those things I do whenever I get access to somebody's test results. I go right immediately and do the leads method. And I really don't have to have any idea about how they are related to any of their matches to use it. So it's really very nice. And the reason we start at 400 is because people 400 and below are more likely to be at that level of cousinship. So they're more likely to be second cousins, because of course, first cousins are going to be related to two grandparents, but second cousins would only be related to one grandparent. And so that's the whole idea behind it, is bringing out those second cousins and figuring out how they're related to you. And of course, once we get further below 90 centimorgans, then you're talking into third, fourth cousins, and we're going a little bit far there. So we want to really keep it to a tight group so it will give us the most effective information. Anybody else got any questions? If you come up with questions later on and you really want to have an answer, you can certainly email me. Tanea has the handout, which she's sending out to anyone who is registered, and my email address is in that handout, and feel free to email me. Anybody else got any questions? All right, great.
Well, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody for joining us today, and thank you, Lisa, for another great program. And if questions occur to people, you can certainly feel free to reach out to either of us as they occur to you, and we'll see what we can do to help you with them.
Excellent. And thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next month. I believe next month, I think we're going beyond Ancestry DNA with more about DNA. So that'll be December 13th, I believe, right, Tanea?
Yes, I believe that's correct. Yep.
Okay, great. Wonderful. It was wonderful to see everybody today, and I appreciate your tuning in, and we will see you next time.